So my rent would have more space.
Yeah. Well.
Yeah.
I
Oh,
was saying, you come to the.
Oh, okay, we are live on Facebook. Just so you guys know.
We're ready whenever you are, Julie.
We are- I think we're okay to go. Whenever you're done.
You all set?
Yep.
Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and call to order the meeting of the Village of Shorewood Hills Finance Committee. Today is Monday, August 25th. The time is now 6:59. Julie, will you call the roll? Here.
Mark Suter,
Present.
Gloria Beach, present, Sean Cody,
Here.
Kate Crowley, present, Liz Heiner, here, and Marilyn Townsend.
present.
Fantastic. No compliance with open meeting laws. Has the meeting been properly posted?
Yes, it has.
Fantastic. We're going to exclude the approval of the minutes tonight. We'll take that up at our next meeting of the committee and move on to public comments. Is there anyone from the public that wishes to comment? Or anyone online, Julie?
We have no one joined via Zoom.
Okay. Did you have a comment?
Comments to add. I thank you very much for.
Okay, all right then. We will continue on. So this is the crazy busy time of year for the village staff on the financial matters, the compilation of the budget, the compilation of the CIP. And just to take it up a notch, we've added the potential purchase of Logic. So it's really crazy and the staff is working very hard to draft the budget, draft the CIP, but it's been made much more complicated by this potential purchase. So where we are now, as I understand it, is we do not have a draft to provide to the committee at this time for either the budget or the CIP. But I wanted to take this time at this meeting to give the committee, the staff and the committee an opportunity to talk about what is the timeline? How are things going? What are the issues that they're facing as they work through this? Essentially, as I understand it, and not to give anything away, but it's kind of almost like two budgets because of the significant impact that something like Logic could have. Also remind the committee that we have not done the village has not done any borrowing this year, but we anticipated a borrowing of at least $1 million, and that has been approved by the board, but that borrowing itself has been held up because of consideration of doing a far larger borrowing if the approval of Logic went through. So there's just a lot of balls in the air, and with us tonight are Brian and Julie to help sort all that out for us and give you an opportunity to ask questions and work our way through the process. So that's my introduction. So Brian, why don't you start us off with a discussion of the 2026 and 2027 operating budgets? Where are we on that?
Okay, so I think it's prudent to start off, since the capital improvement plan is the first piece of the puzzle that needs to be completed.
We'll do that first.
Blends into the budget itself. So typically at this point, we are getting close to completion on our capital improvement plan for the new next 5-year iteration. The property purchase, the facilities purchase, obviously got entered into the mix at the 11th hour from a planning standpoint. So I had a good conversation with our financial advisor there, Brett Beget, last week, kind of talking through where we are at the moment, how I had prepared our original capital improvement plan, and what we will likely need to have prepared as a result of the potential for the facilities project entering the mix. So as things stand, just for a refresher, our budget, or our capital improvement plan from last year showed that we were going to have a sizable borrowing happen next year related to the facilities project. If the Logic project proceeds This year, if we do go forward with that, we will be changing our borrowing plan accordingly and front loading the borrowing into 2025. Hence what Mark just said about we put things on hold temporarily. So where that leads me from a capital improvement planning standpoint is the version of the capital improvement plan that I was preparing is going to be one of probably more than 2 versions of a capital improvement plan that we likely will be presenting. I will be doing an alternate capital improvement plan to show the logic building or facilities project borrowing in 2025 instead of 2026. So we will be formulating that CIP alongside the version that I had been working on up to this point. I did talk with Brad a little bit more about some of the considerations behind what the village could do if we did look at a property sale here at the current Village Hall Police Department site, if the logic were to proceed. So we're kind of thinking strategically about possibly a third version of a CIP, which would show money coming in from a possible sale of this property if we went to the logic building. So this is going to take a lot of work. I'm going to be very busy. I'm going to be dedicating a lot of time over the next couple of weeks to try to get this done. I'm going to try to get the figures to Brad because he does a good part of the planning of the CIP from some of the graphs and the borrowing standpoint for visual aids in the CIP. I'm going to try to have everything over to him as soon as possible. Once the CIPs have been prepared, and we have options available for the board to look at, and for residents to review and finance committee to review and discuss. The likely outcome is still going to remain that we will have to prepare at a minimum 2 village budgets this fall. One, if we do show a borrowing plan that involves financing the facilities project in 2025 and how that will impact our debt capacity in the village. And one, if we move forward with a plan 2026 borrowing for a facilities project. So not necessarily the ideal situation from a timing standpoint, but it is what it is. I'm going to be working at great length trying to get this all prepared as expeditiously as possible. But it's going to be a busy couple of weeks here.
So, Brian, when do you think you will have drafts of these 2 CIPs, either to share with the board or share with the committee or both?
So I will know more from the CIP standpoint probably next week. I'm hopeful to get these versions to Brad by the end of this week so he can start preparing his visual aids, looking at the borrowing scenarios, getting that data back to me so I can put that into a version that can be prepared and presented to the finance committee. But from there, once that has been completed, we are going to be also sending budgets out to department heads and having them work on next year's departmental budgets without completing what Julie and I will need to do from a finance and debt standpoint. That will be kind of the to be determined. We're going to have to work on a couple alternate versions of that part of the budget. But from a departmental standpoint, everyone will be preparing their portions of the budget, getting them back to Julie and myself, so that we can put some numbers together and some figures together and possibly have just a general budget to bring back to the committee on the same timeline that we are hoping to do in the past for your early reviews.
And are there some deadlines in your mind in terms of board action, committee action, board action in order to get all this wrapped up? Because we need the CIP done before we can do the budget. I mean, lots of budget can be due because lots of budget items are not impacted by the capital decision that has to be made. But clearly, until everything's decided, nothing is decided. So the budget, working back from the budget, when does the budget have to be approved? And I assume that's governed by state law, state statutory.
Yeah, those dates, the deadlines are in the packet. The final, we need a budget we have to publish our budget 2 weeks before the public hearing. And the public hearing scheduled for November 11th. I should have this in front of me while I'm talking.
October 20, I mean, you put us, gave us in the packet, the
Yes.
timeline.
Yeah.
So it's October 27th, the newspaper ad, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, so you can see how tight things are. And but the first domino, I guess, is this decision about logic, so that the CIP can get locked up. And at that point, then that information can be carried over into the budget. And we go from 2 budgets and 2 CIPs down to 1 by November, which also I think implies, at least in my discussions with Brian and Julie up to this point, is that we talk about a 90-day clock on the logic purposes, and it probably is a practical matter. It's a lot sooner than that. Not from a legal point of view, not from the point of view of the contract, but just in terms of getting the work done, getting the budget and the CIP done. It will probably require the board to act sooner.
October, you said already, or isn't that on the timeline that folks were given in the board packet for the August meeting? Wasn't there a vote to be taken on logic by the board at the October meeting, or did I misread that?
No, I think that's probably where we'll end up. It'll have to be in October, whether at the regular meeting or a special meeting, in order to make sure that the staff has time to prepare to narrow the 2 budgets down to a single budget. So there may even have to be a special board meeting in early October, even before the regular meeting. So, I mean, we know what the deadline is pursuant to the purchase agreement. My only point is that the practical deadline is before that. And I'm sure both from the staff's point of view, the board's point of view, the residents' point of view, the sooner this decision is made and it gets wrapped up, the better. But you can only do what you can do. Brian will speak a little bit later about the due diligence process. That's obviously one constraint, getting the information out, not just to the board, but to the public. I do expect that the September 4th town hall meeting, in which there'll be an open house preceding it, and then the town hall meeting, the focus will probably almost exclusively be on the logic issues. I'm expecting there will be a presentation by the board and the staff to try get the facts on this issue. There's been a good bit of speculation. A lot of people have been reacting to this purchase in the isolation of you like a logic or you don't like logic. And I think there's so much more to this, to put it in perspective, because it's really our whole capital investment program that starts to shift one way or another, depending on the decision. So I have to say, the communication has been poor. Admittedly, up to now, the timing has not been great. And I think we're all pushing to correct as much of that and to get as much information out and as much of our strategy out, because it isn't just a matter of facts and saying this is the fact about this and this is the fact about that, but is laying out what the strategy is behind the capital investment plan. And so there's a lot of work to be done, and I look forward to September 4th and being able to clear up some things. We won't know everything. I don't expect everything will be crystal clear after September 4th, but I hope for substantial progress. I would expect substantial progress will be made. So Anything more about DBAR,
Yeah, just a
CIP?
question for Julie and Brian. So Brian, you had mentioned it at today's meeting. Julie, I think you mentioned it at the previous board meeting. So we have not issued debt for 2025.
Correct.
I think you were pleading to the fact that at some point in time, you are going to be unable to sleep because of the commitments that have been made. This timeline that we're discussing, I mean, is this putting us in a precarious situation for our inability to get to a decision, to complete a borrowing to satisfy the needs that we have for this 2025 CIP? And Brian, Julie,
I spoke with Brad
okay.
about this, when we first put this on hold back in June.
Yep.
When it came up. I spoke with him a couple weeks ago, to kind of give him an update when we had our final purchase. You know, that this was something that was going to happen. We kind of worked on a timeline. And, he said that if basically he's kind of doing the same thing Brian is, we're gonna have to have all the paperwork ready in October to do the bigger borrowing. We would have to do, it'd actually be two separate borrowings if we bought the Logic, because some of the property there would be taxable bond issue and some would be non-taxable bond issue, because it has, if we're leasing out those properties on the main floor, those are taxable bond issues, so it has a slightly higher interest rate. So we would have all that ready to go, and then basically we would have the board approve it contingent upon the purchase. And then we already have the other, and we would roll in the 1.1 that we had already approved into that borrowing. So basically we would pretty much just take all of our 26 borrowing, 25 borrowing, put it together and do it as one borrowing that we would get in November. The other scenario is if the Logic doesn't go through, he would pull the trigger immediately, and then we would still get what we had approved earlier for the 1.1 million. And we would get just that amount in November, and then we can restructure for 26 for what we need to do.
So thank you for that thorough explanation. I guess my question was more to your second point.
Okay.
So you're essentially stating that yes, we'll be fine, but as soon as we get into the middle of October, or I guess the deadline around the third week of October, we'll be fine until then, but nothing later than that. Decision has to be made in order to remain on solid footing.
Yes.
So we haven't borrowed, but we will borrow this year, and it'll be either $1 million plus in a private placement, which was our original plan and the board approved, or it'll be, I don't know, $8 million. I'm just throwing out a number, which would be Logic plus what we need to pay off for the capital expenditures in 2025, this year's capital expenditure to replenish the capital fund.
25 and 20, because that would have our others capitals, I can't even speak, capital expenses that we were planning for 26.
Right. Yeah, because we had in the facilities study, as I recall, just that aspect of the CIP between 25 and 26, we had about $7.3 million planned.
We have smaller amounts for street projects.
For those projects. And so we had planned on a large borrowing, presumably in 26, in order to do the original CIP plan facilities, which is renovations built to Village Hall and renovations to the Public Works Station. So that had already been there, and the committee had already seen that financing when we presented the CIP to you last year. That had those that 7.3 million was in there. But now we're obviously looking at a larger amount. And because if Logic falls through, we aren't ready to do the original CIP plan. I mean, the 7.3 that we had planned to spend, we don't have a design, much less architectural plans and so on. If we did do renovations to both Village Hall and to the Public Works building, whatever. So if Logic doesn't go through, that larger borrowing would probably get pushed out in time until we got to the point where we said, yeah, the board's approved a conceptual design. It has architectural drawings. It's It has contractors and talking to people, it's ready to go. So either we're borrowing a larger sum this year for Logic, or presumably we're borrowing a larger sum next year, or perhaps the year after that, or whenever we get our act together to figure out what the capital and reinvestment is in the existing buildings. Clear as mud?
I just want to start by feeling like I want to apologize to staff. As I am hearing you talk about all you have to do and the parallel plans, I think that is the most unreasonable request any employer could make of staff. It makes no sense, none. And Mark, with all due respect, when you said there's a lot of misinformation out there, I would say there's no information out there. And it appears clear that while June, July, and August, some of us thought the board was doing due diligence on a possible purchase, it appears there's no documents. There was no due diligence. There was this June 12th memo from the president that spoke in glorious terms about the revenue we can get from a daycare and restaurant. And there's no there. And the residents came in on August 19th. And we're very grateful to the board. I thought the kindness in general, they said, was, but have you thought of this? Have you thought of that? Not to mention, is there even parking for a village hall, a restaurant, a daycare? I just feel that what the board should do is have a special meeting and say, we do not have the time to do adequate due diligence by October. And Mark, you were very clear in August, and I give you credit for that at the last board meeting when the president said, we have 90 days. You said, no, we don't have 90 days. This is not realistic. This is simply not. And then at the last board meeting, there was a presentation talking about different options of 10 million, 11 million. And the residents are not against paying more in taxes, but they are against throwing good money after bad. And there was a sense that we buy the Logic, all we have is the same square footage as we have here. And then we have this restaurant and this daycare. And while I heard some trustees say, well, we don't have to have a restaurant, but there was one of the residents who said, I managed 20 restaurants. If you're not going to have it, then you've got to pull out the equipment. Then there's all this expense. And of course, there's going to be a restaurant because the board already agreed to spend over $500,000 for all that equipment. This makes no sense. And I really feel badly for our staff to be asked to do the impossible. You can't do what you were bravely laying out was going to be done. It makes no sense. And
Okay,
I say enough on that.
I think what we're going to do is we will take that issue up, a process up, but not right now. It is on the agenda, right? The due diligence, and I asked Brian and Julie to speak to the process. So we will return to that. And I think they will respond to some of those concerns, Marilyn. But right now, let's stay on the agenda. Are we done with questions about the CIP process so that we can then move on to the 26-27 budget? Are there any more questions about the CIP itself and the process of getting that done? Seeing Sean,
The only comment I have is really just how much discussion has there been about just the length of the borrowing, if it goes through or not? If there's any changes in what we're doing for, I don't even know how old the Logic building is. I feel like it was 2018, somewhere in that area, versus building a new building and what we've historically done for the length of borrowing for a structure. Honestly, a 10, 15, 20 years in that time period. But I mean, if we're going through this process and starting to have Brad do some work, I think from past borrowings, it seems pretty cut and dry as far as the length. And sometimes there's a significant difference between the interest rate versus 20 versus 15, 20 versus 10. And again, just doing something, a 3-minute search this afternoon on just muni rates. And the difference is, I guess, I don't know if I'm making a comment or I have a question, but to me, it's more just like working with Brad and what is recommended for borrowing for a structure. How old is that structure? We've always looked at this borrowing for kind of a new structure versus something that might be like 8 years old. I don't know the date on it exactly, but I guess what I'd like for this committee, something that's pretty important, is to really look, I don't know if we're set on like a 15-year, a 10-year, or 20-year. I can't, I should have looked at this ahead of time, but just to have Brad maybe give a little bit more context. If we're just set on doing this length of borrowing, because this is what we've planned for the last 2 years, I just want to make sure that we have an expert who is kind of giving us, well, here's the difference between the rate in a 20 and a 15. Here's historically what municipalities do from a structure versus improvements on the roads, which is typically maybe like 10 years or I don't even know if that's correct. But anyways, that I think for this committee, for me at least, that would be helpful just to have Brad maybe give a little bit more context sometimes to here's what we're looking at. Because a lot of times when it's presented to us, it is just here's the length of the borrowing, here's what we're anticipating or range for the interest rate. And I'd kind of like to get a little bit more context as to what is recommended and what we're thinking about for the length of the borrow.
can you speak to a little bit of your conversations with Brad thus far?
From my understanding, obviously, a borrowing of this significance for this village, it will be a lengthier borrowing plan. I don't know specifically if there's a set, 15 versus 20-year timeline. My initial reaction would be this facilities project would be a 20.
Yep, that's what I would guess. But yeah, I mean, but I would think it'd be helpful just to give us a little bit of context as to what the thought is to doing this, and then also just buying an existing building, which again looks on the outside brand new, but just getting kind of an understanding. Because again, I would agree that it would make sense for where the interest rates are. From what I saw, the difference between like a 20 versus a 10-year, it might seem like a no-brainer to do that, but I still would like a little bit more context for us as a committee to kind of say, this is why we're just, again, if his projections are only at 20 years, I would at least like to have him address that a little bit as to why. Maybe we'd look at 15 and 20, but.
And the other major issue too is the other borrowings, because whether it's these facilities that get renovated or whether it's Logic, you got that piece, that big piece, but there's streets, there's McKenna Park, there's the community center, there's other borrowings. So it's not just a matter of modeling 2026, it's the impact thereafter. I mean, from my perspective, the goal is he's got to keep two things in one. One is we want to keep a strong credit rating, right? In my mind, doesn't have to be AAA, but it has to be strong credit rating, giving them a little flexibility. And then beyond that, we have to be very cognizant of the impact of the debt tax levy, right? Because we've always tried to smooth that levy so the residents, when they get their tax bill, they'll all of a sudden see it jump 1 year, not because of the debt raised, not because of the cost of financing operations, which is fairly constant, but this big increase of debt which gets passed through and the debt service associated with that. So he doesn't even have the projects all fixed yet, but at the same time, he's thinking about these issues, keeping the credit high, making sure that the debt service levy is relatively smooth over time and not going up and down year to year and driving people crazy. So yeah, there's a lot to be done. Dietmar.
Yeah, perhaps any conjecture on my part here, but I thought Brad had talked about that at one of our meetings. And again, I think it's a great question. I think he is amortizing it over 10 years for this borrowing. And I could be completely wrong on this, but I seem to remember him actually analyzing that. So yes, there's an answer already out there.
Not for the facility though, people.
Yeah, for the five, like when we used to have 5.7, that was like out in like a couple of years from now. I think that one was longer, but I could be wrong too. I don't know.
Sure. So yeah, we'll find out and
I'll ask.
no effects.
I think you're right about it for the shorter borrowing, the 1.1. I believe that was 10 years. But then if we end up wrapping it together with the borrowing for the next year, which would be facilities would, I think he had it at 20 years.
It could, yeah, 20 or 15. It was it was something, yeah. So,
I think.
but I guess the last thing I'll say on that, sorry, but I think we've been in a really good financial situation because we've always kind of leaned towards like ripping the Band-Aid off a little bit and doing shorter term borrowing. And in the past 15, 20 years, if we would have gone like 5 years longer for a lot of this, I think we're in a really good position. So it's like, again, this may be something where it's like, yeah, we definitely want to do 20 years, but I don't know. I would just, for this large of a borrowing, I would like to maybe have more of a discussion and more just analysis done for maybe 20 versus 15 versus even 10 and what that looks like.
Yeah, I appreciate that. 1 second, Lord. Just let me finish on that
Yeah.
point, and that is that I'm prepared to call a special meeting of the finance committee. I mean, the problem right now is we need to get the CIP kind of locked down, and then Brad can finish his modeling. And then as soon as he has some preliminary modeling results, having a committee meeting, starting to look at that whenever that is. So that's on the radar. Gloria.
The only remark I was going to make is I was going to ask if we could please just CIP budget, logic, it's all a ball of string. But if we could just do as you asked and let him wrap up his budget and CIP before we go into logic,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
the questions, the remarks you're making really are dovetailing on what Marilyn was speaking to, which was the logic building. So if we're going to talk about the logic building, then let's open the floor and let's do logic. But otherwise, I think let Brian finish what he has to say about CIP budget, and then let's go forward.
Are we done with the CIP? Because there's not lots. So talk about the budget as it's starting to shape up in 26, 27.
Okay. So right now, as I mentioned earlier, staff, department heads are going to be getting back their numbers to both Julie and I, so we can get those figures put together and shared with the committee. As far as what we anticipate for 2026, there definitely will be a need to utilize some of the village's reserves for funding part of the 2026 budget that we are fairly certain will absolutely happen. Now for 2027, that's a little bit longer window, but that's where the logic building and the property potential from revenue could change where we are as a village. Ellers, I just had a conference call with them last week. They are putting together our village financial model right now. We gave them some of the different assumptions we'd like them to include from feedback from our trustees. They are going to be working on putting that together. I did ask them to include the potential for some revenue from what a facilities project like Logic might produce, so we can have a better idea looking out beyond our traditional 1-year budgetary planning window to see how that might impact things long term. But the fact fact remains that I think the village is going to have to make some sound decisions in the coming years, with or without logic, as to where we go and where our priorities lie and what are we willing to put a financial price tag on supporting, if we are not, as a community, wanting to go to referendum.
Yeah, so, Brian, as I understand, then the bottom line is the 2026 budget, we will probably have minimal levy capacity
Correct.
because there's no new net construction or it's minimal. So we will be digging into the unassigned fund balance to balance that budget, as well as looking at the expense side. And at this point, you didn't address it. I know it's hard, but we seem to have above our target or at the high end of our range on our unassigned fund balance based on last year and what we expect for this year. So at the moment, we don't think we're going to actually go below our, even though we're going to have to use some unassigned fund balance to balance the 26 budget. It will not take us so far down below that it exceed, that it drops below our minimum or maybe even our target. So that's the good news, that we have that surplus there for a rainy day like 26 appears. 27, it's a different situation, right? Because we're not expecting we're going to have surplus fund balance in that year. And so we will be looking to hopefully perhaps additional revenues that are not coming from property taxes. And if we don't have those, then we'll run up against the levy limit and probably end up having to either drastically cut expenses or go to referendum or both. So it was, I think I asked Brian, just let's give the committee a heads up as to these are the kinds of challenges. And as we get further along in preparing the CIP and the budget, it'll come into clearer view. But I don't think these challenges will go away. I mean, these are likely to be there with logic, without logic. It's just the reality of the situation that we're in. So anything more, Brian or Julie, you want to add on that?
Well, go ahead and add, and then I'll ask.
No,
again.
I'm good.
I was gonna ask, what are the next steps with the Ellers financial management plan?
I'm sorry, where is it?
What are the next steps with the Ellers plan?
So the data that we just returned to them last week, I mean, we've been having ongoing discussions. They've been asking for updates, and I've been giving them some of the requests from our end as well. They will be putting together the financial model. They are due to come back to the village. They will be giving another presentation with those final assumptions included that we've asked them to adjust. So I think this is going to be a good tool for both the finance committee and the board, from a planning standpoint, to now be able to better assume where we are both financially and from a vision planning standpoint of what we're looking to make adjustments to as we go forward. But they will be back. I don't have the definitive date by which they will have the most recent adjustments completed. I would assume they're probably going to be talking to us this upcoming month, September, about a return either at the end of September, early October would be my guess.
Does that mean, Brian, that they will be presenting the board community with two models? I mean, two scenarios? Because at that point in time, we may or may not know about logic. So, I mean, I'm just wondering, is that something?
I think logic is going to be a piece of what they present to us, with any potential from the revenues generating standpoint that I gave them. I think it's going to be on us to remove that from their presentation to assume what we're going to be operating with without.
Okay, it's just that, obviously Ellers, I think, is a very valuable tool to us. I agree with that. And I think it will help us in the planning process. But given the level of uncertainty right now, we're talking several scenarios. And so there isn't one scenario they can give us, and that's the future. I mean, whatever they present, the board is likely to say, well, we still need to tweak it. And they may need to. So if they present something in September, October, and the decision has been made yet. Once the decision is made, they may have to come back and run it again. But fortunately, you know, whatever it is, 90% of it, 95% of the assumptions are there. It's all built, it's running, they've already made a presentation, so it's not a huge amount of work on their part to change a couple of assumptions. And that could have a fairly significant impact, so.
But wouldn't it be prudent to show the general public both assumptions?
I
I
personally
mean,
would
so
benefit
just
from
like
it, but
they're running to a parallel scheme, shouldn't they also be running a parallel scheme? Because we're doing an analysis here of what's the better path, and if we don't know empirically what that looks like, how can we really judge this?
no, I
So we're
agree with you,
asking-
but I don't know.
I think
I'll ask.
in a way, I
Yeah.
feel like we need to ask the consultants to also run this parallel path.
Put the two budgets, put the two CIPs in the model and produce scenario A and scenario B. And
I think
and
so.
bring that. If that's possible, you could, it could be a good idea to raise that issue with them. So any other questions about the timeline of the challenges? Yes, go ahead.
I'm new, so in some ways I'm.
No.
So this stepping back from logic, just like when we hired Ellers to do the financial management plan, it's goofy now because of logic, I realize, but in the original plan, where in this process does this committee provide input into the financial management plan? Because I don't know that I heard that. I mean, other than we can call you and tell you, do they come here at some point? Do we talk about assumptions?
I would like the finance committee to be involved. And obviously the time frame is very compressed now. So we have a couple options. One is we could have joint meetings of the finance committee and the board. And when they roll it out for the board, we're at the table and talk about it then. Or we could try to get the finance committee a sneak preview before the board. I mean, I think that would be preferable to me rather than, because it just becomes a little unmanageable when they're presenting to such a large audience, the combined board and the finance committee. And I think the finance committee has a level of sophistication greater than the board with respect to these financial things. So I think it'd be great if we could preview what they intend to present to the board, and if necessary, recommend some adjustments and go from there. So, yeah,
Thank you.
let's get as much value out of the model as we can, especially given all the uncertainty we have. Anything more about the CIP or the budget before we move on to the due diligence process? Hearing none. Brian, you're back on due diligence.
Okay, so Mark asked me to kind of speak to the committee a little bit about some of the behind the scenes planning right now related to the Logic building. And although this is still relatively new and we're just getting underway on this, I've had a couple of meetings thus far with some of our members of the board, Village President Imes, kind of talk through where we are headed from a planning standpoint. I've had a couple of individual meetings with a few different individuals related to this project. I will run through just kind of a little bit of a preliminary rundown of where we are right now from a divvying up of responsibilities and planning standpoint, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you guys have about this. So Village President Imes and myself have been speaking to the realtor about some of the financials related to the property. Obviously, we held some meetings with some of the property management team members involved with the Logic previously to kind of learn a little bit more about the background, what considerations we would need to take into account if we became owners of this property. So from a property management, a lease potential, and potential interest from businesses who might have an interest with those properties. Village President Imes and myself have taken the lead on those fronts. Obviously, there's considerable financial impact with the purchase of the property. And Mark is going to be speaking to that a little bit more. I think we're preparing some materials for the September 4th Village Town Hall related to some of those factors. But Mark, Village President Imes, and myself are working on some of that at the moment. We have a couple of trustees right now who have background in facilities management and or building projects.
Who's that? I'm sorry.
Well-
Who's that?
Bob Falk and Dietmar have background in that we will be utilizing their expertise on. I have already had conversations from our IT standpoint with our current IT provider, Computer Magic, as far as doing a assessment of the property from their side and the needs side of things. That will be a scheduled meeting forthcoming in the coming weeks. And I've also reached out to an architect about potential needs related to interior renovations. And I'm in the process of coordinating that right now as well. So again, like Mark said, many balls in the air right now. I've got a lot of things that I'm trying to work out. But I wanted to give you all just kind of a glimpse into where we are at the moment. We're going to have many more meetings to kind of discuss what changes and what leads we still need to determine. But I think those are kind of highlighting the most important ones that we've laid out right now.
Yeah, so it's pretty clear that the due diligence process is going to extend beyond September 4th meeting, that all the answers are not going to be available then. Based on the conversations I've had and my own work in this area, there'll be a lot. It'll move us definitely forward, but there's a lot of work still to be done in a relatively short amount of time. Let me just ask, with respect to the prospects for the businesses on the first floor, what, other than talking to the realtor, and the realtor I assume you're talking to is the one representing the seller in this case, right? And their historical data. Yeah. So what thought has there been given to doing any due diligence or investigation as to the prospects for those business going forward, independent of the seller's representations, if you will?
Sure. So we just had a meeting with the property management leads from the Logic, and they provided some good feedback, some recommendations and thoughts for best uses, best alignment of what would fit well within the facility from a potential lessor standpoint. We do have a couple of leads right now. Mark had mentioned current listing agent had a couple of recommendations that we're going to be touching base with and pursuing, seeing what they're gauging their interest from that standpoint, crunching some numbers from what the current market values might be for a potential lease for any interested renters of the sites. But we're just getting started. There's a lot of things that we're looking at. Different pieces are being handled by different individuals right now. And we're doing the best that we can. We're working as hard as we can.
No doubt.
I have a question, just to quickly follow up on that. The current listing agent has a few leads for restaurants. How long has it been vacant?
How long has the
restaurant? Yeah,
properties?
I remember the restaurant Everyday Kitchen was there, but how long has it been vacant since Everyday Kitchen left?
So I apologize if I don't have the dates. I believe they closed a couple of months after the 2020-ish COVID.
So they've been vacant for a couple of years.
Oh,
I
yeah.
think that's what I understand.
Yeah,
Couple
couple
years.
years.
Yep.
Yes.
5 years.
So,
I know.
So the current owners then are developers. I mean, how come they haven't been able to put somebody in that restaurant?
So the dynamic, from my understanding, with Moose Organization being the property owner of the facility.
Right.
One of the biggest pieces or the biggest challenges that Moose has faced with this is they've never listed this property for independent lease. It was an all or nothing sale of the building as a whole. So they had had many people reach out with an interest to put a daycare into that, but the daycare had no interest in renting the office space upstairs or running a restaurant. And they'd also have restaurant interest in the property with no interest in running a daycare. So the building was always listed for sale as a 3-piece component. They had had a lot of interest for either the office, no restaurant, no daycare, or parking and office space, but they could not find someone who identified a need to utilize all 3. And that was what the property has been listed for sale as.
Yeah, what I understand is Moose International, this isn't their only property like this. They've had multiple properties like this. Some have done well, what I'm told, including the one in Madison, but others have not done well. And they have made a decision to get out of the business. They just don't want to do it anymore. And they made the decision that they didn't want to lease out the building to separate parties and to deal with it. They just were done. And that's why it's sad, because nobody else up to this point has been interested in buying the whole enchilada. They just wanted pieces of it.
So what I hear you saying, and I don't feel like I'm hearing you correctly.
Yeah.
So what I hear you saying is that Moose International, when they built this building, they themselves were running the office space, they themselves were running the daycare, and they themselves were running the restaurant.
And here and in other locations as
Okay,
well.
so
This
as
was,
a big,
business
they
model.
had 3 different components to their business.
Yep.
And then they never tried to find, okay, look, we know how to do the office, but let's let somebody else do. They never tried to allow a third party to come in.
I think
So
my
there's-
understanding is this business model didn't work in a number of locations where they were doing this. And that Madison was working, but the others were not. And they said, we don't want to be in this business just to have Madison. And so it wasn't worth, I guess, their overhead and their oversight and their attention to just have one building operating in this manner.
So then would I be correct in thinking that if we were to buy this building, now we're in the business of property leasing. Is that going to be a new person that we've hired to do that? Or is that going to be additional work for the staff that's already working a lot? I
one of
saw a
the pieces.
nod. I saw a finger.
I defer to Brian on that one.
Yeah, this is one of the pieces that we're doing. Right now. We had a meeting with the prior property management team that Logic had hired for doing that work there, and talked to them about the potential of doing that on an ongoing basis going forward. So we're looking into that to answer the question. I don't have a definitive answer for you, but we are considering that as probably the likely outcome.
Okay, I'm not a developer. I really don't know anything about this, except I listen to developers say this property would be worth more if they did entertain, if they had a lease for the restaurant and if they had. So I'm kind of are they lying to you guys? I mean, it just doesn't make sense to me that you're saying they just said we walked away from everything. I would think they would try to maximize their profits.
That's
So-
a story I've gotten, and I've got it secondhand, so
Well, but.
I wouldn't put a
mean-
lot of faith in it, but that's what.
I mean, I wouldn't listen to the listing agent.
I know, right? And I just think about like some really fine
I
restaurant.
mean, it's
in
what,
Madison have gone out of business recently.
right, I actually have a friend that, a developer had a restaurant and it just closed, so I don't know. It doesn't pass the smell test to me, and I'm not. So who's doing the due diligence on whatever the listing agent's telling you guys?
That was my question to Brian earlier, saying, we obviously we can't rely on those representations. We'd love to get the information, but we have to follow up on it, especially if as we do our modeling and think about what does this business look like in the future, that model is grounded in reasonable assumptions. And we're not there yet. I mean, the other alternative is to say, what if there is no tenant to the first floor? There just isn't any, and we rent the second floor, and we figure out the first floor later. What does that look like from a financial standpoint for the
Or what
village?
if we're vacant on both
So
floors
what,
going forward?
what's the
If
impetus?
first floor is vacant and the
Both
second floor
floors,
is,
the daycare, neither. Let's say you can't find a tenant for either floor.
no, they're the daycare and the kitchen on the first floor.
Oh,
So
okay.
we have all the second
Okay.
floor and the first floors. So that's
Yeah.
what I'm saying. It's just,
Just to be completely ignorant, what's the impetus to do this? Is it to get, it's this presumed revenue flow from leasing out the first floor?
that's what I'm working on. That's what Brian's working on. That's the presentation for September 4th. I mean, but yes, having other sources of, I'll just give you one hypothetical, okay? Say you buy this building, okay? The tenant would be administration, everyone who works in this building, which means this building is now vacant. This building sits on a valuable piece of property that we did a University Corridor Avenue study, which was incorporated into our comprehensive plan. And we recognize that we want additional revenue unaffiliated, untied to property taxes, right? So this whole area is ripe for development, and I think we've all been pushing to get more development on University Avenue corridor. And this property might be the key or a catalyst to doing that. Not our development, but somebody else purchasing this.
So it flat.
And Flad owns the Shorewood, the boulevard. I think he owns, but Brian, you can confirm, the two properties next door. In other words, if he has this property, he has the block. That's a huge palette for him to paint whatever he's going to paint on. So it's not just the sale of this property and the money that might be received, but that commercial development itself will raise property taxes, income to the village. So it's both a revenue stream unaffiliated with property taxes from not a revenue stream, a one-time sale proceeds.
And it
But
puts us back
additional
on the
to-
on the tax rolls. This puts this block, this property back in the tax rolls. But then wouldn't it also be conversely true that we're looking at a TID 3 that is not performing tremendously well, and we're taking a parcel out of TID 3 and taking away that tax revenue?
And the tax revenue, our share of the tax revenue, because I think they pay about $100,000 in taxes every year, property taxes, logic.
Logic does,
Logic,
okay.
okay. So, but if you just look at what we receive, not the other taxing jurisdictions, it's more like $27,000 in that
27,000
ballpark.
for logic.
So that would be, if we acquire the property, that
Mhm.
$27,000
Goes
would
away,
come off
right.
the tax rolls. But hopefully, if this property got sold, we'd get the money from that. And if there was redevelopment from this whole block, then that
Over
much
which
higher
we have no
assessed
control,
value.
Over which we have no control. We cannot open this area to TID, I believe, until 2030. Is that correct?
We
So
have
this
three.
is actually an agenda item that
Yeah.
I've been asking for since 2024.
Yeah.
This
We-
discussion.
We have three kids, okay? We have
Right.
three kids. The one that Logic's in is TID 3.
Correct,
That TID dissolves in 2031.
right.
There's a TID 4, I believe,
It
that
is.
dissolves in 2030.
Right.
But there's tremendous potential revenue coming out of that. For instance, there's an annual report that's done each year on the performance of the TIDs and projects them to the end of their life.
And the most recent one we have online is 2023.
Correct. They're behind on getting us 2024.
And
That's
then there's TID-
Vanderwall does
there's
that
TID number
for us.
5.
So, But if you just look at the 23 projection, TID 3, when it dissolves in 2031, the incremental, the additional tax revenue that TID 3, those properties, that is Marshall Court will generate, is over $400,000. So we're talking a very substantial increase in revenue, but the problem is it's 2031 and not 2025, 26, 27. So from a financial point of view, we've got 6 years, right, to get to that point where we can tap into, where we can dissolve those, at least TID 3.
TID 3.
Marshall Court is the big
TID
one.
4 is 30 and TID 5, I think is 44.
2040 something, yeah,
I think it's
it's quite,
44.
but the most value is in TID 3. I mean, the others are relatively small, much smaller in terms of the increment that's been projected to the close. But TID 3 is a big deal. But we have to wait. Kate,
I was just gonna say, we could close TID 3 presumably earlier if we had more increment from the redevelopment of this building.
if we can extinguish all the we can't dissolve until all the liabilities are paid off, right? We can't leave TID 3 holding the bag.
Yeah, I'm saying if we had more revenue
Exactly.
from this, it could move up the date.
Yep.
Well, I guess my point is if we were to sell this parcel right here and now goes into this big block for the University Corridor redevelopment. If I'm a developer, and I'm really far away from being a developer, you know that, but if I'm a developer, I'm gonna keep my powder dry until I can get a TID on this whole parcel, like on this whole block. And so that's why I'm discussing TID. And this is why I've had this as an agenda item for future thing. This is a discussion of prospective new TID or TID modification on University Avenue since 2024. I've been asking for this discussion.
We'll be out of our expenditure period on this TID.
We already are.
Oh, we already are.
If the TID was
Yeah.
extended
Yeah.
to 31. Yeah, so.
And I believe we just extended the TID to cover the University Avenue costs.
Correct.
So
And the
That
reason we
was
can't, there's a possibility we could close it maybe a year early, but we do have debt in that TID, and so until we get enough increment to pay that debt, we can't really close it much. We're not counting on closing it earlier, and we also still have, developer payments that we're making.
I'm sure this will be part of the conversation, maybe not the biggest part of the September 4th and a future finance committee, but I do want to get back to this due diligence process. So we've talked about the restaurants, the prospect for those businesses, and get more comfort as to what kind of assumptions are reasonable for what those lease payment streams will look like in subsequent years if it was acquired. And so I just getting back to the due diligence, are there other particular areas of due diligence that you want to focus?
Can I ask just
Yes.
another question? So our borrowing for 2026 or 7, whatever it was, the 5.7 million was for a public works building. So, right? Or a public, that's what we were.
The
it was a
current
place,
CIP contemplated borrowing for this building and for public works renovations, not replacement, renovations.
Okay, so my question is this, if the Logic building was to be purchased,
Yeah.
does it take the 5.7, whatever it was, completely off the table or just partially off the table or?
Again, I don't have that answer. And that's another, as we work through the modeling, that is another issue. If Logic was purchased, what happens to all the other projects? How do they get rejiggered, right? Because we wouldn't be putting any more money back into this building, right? If we all move to Logic, but we still have public works to deal with. And we still have street projects and we still have McKenna Park. And so that's why it's so complicated. It isn't just a matter of swapping out this building and public works renovations for Logic. Because you still have to deal with the fact that Public Works still needs, is an issue, still has to be
So there-
addressed in some way.
Another stupid question, maybe.
You know, it's a good question.
So
I wish you had a good answer.
do we anticipate if we were to sell this property, would it go for more than the logic? I mean, the board must have some comparable, less. I mean, I realize it's not just the sale of this building that you're looking for, but that's not a factor.
I don't think the board hasn't gotten as far as to figure out the what if. All we know is if we sold this building, we'd obviously have those sales proceeds. As to where we would direct those proceeds, what we would use those proceeds for, it's not been discussed. It's not. So again,
It's a big
there'll be some more speculation on.
big due diligence though, isn't it? But yes, I mean, just having a reasonable high, low, middle number. I mean, so again,
Yeah.
Brian, I'm not saying that you guys haven't thought about that.
No,
Obviously you
sure,
have.
sure.
So, but
John
to
has
me,
spoken
that
so
is a
many
big
times
piece of the
where
puzzle.
He has asserted how much he feels that this building is worth.
What is it?
It depends on which meeting you're listening to.
Did you say John Flight? I didn't.
John Ives.
Oh, John Ives, okay.
No,
So one of the things I think I can speak to definitively, we wouldn't get the same profit out of this site as what Logic is currently selling for. That much I know. One of the things that we did talk about when I spoke with Brad last week was possibly making one of the versions of the CIP geared towards showing the revenue from a sale of this. And we could do a conservative low estimate for what we think we might be able to get for this. But if Logic were to go forward, we could either use the revenue from the sale of this to pay off the taxable
That's
notes
exactly what
at
I was
the
thinking.
higher
Is it,
interest.
do we have an idea of what percent the taxable portion of that is, of the 6 point?
I
or
don't
just 6
remember. I
million?
know he gave me some percentage. I don't
Okay.
remember exactly, but it's definitely.
Because that's exactly what I was thinking, is
Yeah.
that we could do a shorter term for that and
Correct.
factor this. I mean, even saying like, okay, maybe ideally it'd be like in 2 or 3 years that this would sell, maybe 5 years, do 5-year borrowing for that, or, okay, so at least you guys are thinking about
Yeah,
that. Okay,
that's one of the
perfect.
pieces. The other one is you might be able to, at some of the revenue from the sale of that, build and take little pieces of the interest off of it to fund different things
yeah,
annually to help. Yeah.
No,
So-
we had a windfall from the fire department sale and stuff, and that really helped budgeting wise. There's a lot of creative things we can do.
Yes.
Okay, cool.
yeah, but I think the one thing we want to avoid is hard coding in some sales
Oh,
brokers that
absolutely.
we don't even have. And it would not be good for our negotiations with whoever that purchaser is, to be in a situation where, well, we already spent those proceeds, so we now need to complete the sale. So it's something you would presumably bank for the future.
I have a question about timeline, please. So an offer to purchase was made.
Mhm.
And then there's a counter offer, and then there's an accepted offer. When did the board decide to extend the offer to purchase?
I'm not sure. Did you?
June. So I see there's a June 17th board meeting. Was it at the board meeting?
Yes, it was in that close session.
So.
Yeah.
It's a strange timeline for me. And the reason it's a strange timeline is because our consultant, I'm understanding, was asked to draw up some scenarios on financing this purchase, and that was done before the board meeting in June.
All right, say that again.
The consultant that works for the village was asked to draw up a hypothetical financing.
Which consultant was
Baird.
that?
Baird.
Okay,
And
Your
that
question
was the,
Mr. Bryan, not
they
me.
were, Baird drew up this financing prior to the June board meeting, where the board voted on this.
Okay. I don't remember the exact dates of and
I don't know date, but
Well,
yes,
my understanding is that Baird produced a financing scenario on June 11th,
okay.
and the board meeting was June 17th.
Well, Dietmar, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't recall any work product from Baird being delivered to the board, right? I don't think the board has seen any fun. So I think there was a
So
conversation.
There might,
Right about that, and I don't know the dates without looking at all my stuff. I was asked ahead of time if it was a possibility, and he ran that quickly for me. I said, if we were to make a purchase and want to move 6 million from 26 borrowing into 25, how would that affect, property taxes? So he ran that so that we had that before the board had their closed session.
so before the board
The board did
decided,
not see that.
so when did the board understand they were going into closed session to purchase this property?
It would have been when the packets came out, so Thursday or Friday before the meeting.
So June 17th.
Oh, they got that before? the
Well, they didn't
motion?
get it. They never got that. It was just something that Brad sent. They never actually saw that. I don't.
So June 17th, I'm guessing they would have gotten their packet on the 13th, so they had a weekend to review.
No, they didn't. She's saying my understanding
I
was
know
they had
they
no
didn't get
idea
the
what they were
stuff.
doing.
They didn't get the
They-
Baird stuff. That
I
was-
know they didn't get the Baird stuff, but they went into closed session, the board went into closed session not knowing that they were going to be asked to consider purchasing Logic.
I don't know.
That
Is
was
the
my
case?
understanding, because that's all the public didn't know.
I don't. Did we have packets?
Yes, you did.
Well, we had regular board
So
packets.
for,
Did
for
you
the,
guys- is that-
for the June meeting, the board, please, Brian, speak up. I think this is all public knowledge now, right? We're
Mhm.
beyond the
Yeah,
closed session.
right.
A confidential packet of information was delivered to each trustee to
Gotcha.
consider for the closed board meeting.
Gotcha.
In that packet, there is no information of any financial valuation or financial models that
Okay.
ran different scenarios.
So that answers my question. So there was a confidential packet that was distributed.
Absolutely.
So
Okay,
they got that before the motion on the closed session. So they
Correct.
had all that information.
that's what it sounds like. Yeah.
But we had nothing from Baird. There was nothing from Baird in that. There were no financing scenarios in that package.
Okay.
It
That's
was
what I'm just trying to understand is like how.
descriptions of the property.
board- I'm really just trying to work out like, how does this work? Where the board goes into closed session on the 17th. And then a few days later, I mean, like I've got like my little Word document. And then on the 19th, there's an offer to purchase. And, you know, it's drafted, it's signed on the 20th. And then, you know, then there's the counter offer and whatnot, but it's just like, well, I just wonder, how does all this work? So that answers my question, Dietmar. I appreciate that. So basically what happens is you get your board packet and you get a special board packet that this is confidential, not to be released and to be discussed during closed session. Then you go to the board meeting where there was an agenda item, item 9, that there would be possibly a closed session and regarding the acquisition of lands for public facilities. You guys go in closed session and then you come out and you say there's no further, the board is going to take no further action or no action coming out of session. And really no action means that we're not going to sit down at the dais and do something now. Because there was an action, I guess, in so much that an offer to purchase was drafted and signed.
So I'm failing to understand your question.
I'm-
So it's all public knowledge. The board voted on extending an offer to
Right.
purchase. The majority of the board concurred.
Right.
2 trustees, including me, did not concur with that decision to extend an offer to purchase because I can't speak for Kate. I personally don't believe in furthering even the notion and entertaining the notion of acquiring this property because I I have different feelings on how we should assign our borrowing needs and debt capacity. So this is all,
Sure.
most of it is public knowledge. Certainly the voting record is out there. It was a roll call vote. So if that's
Right,
what you're
no, I
after.
was just trying to understand when the board goes into closed session. And then they come out of closed session and they say, no action. The board will be taking no action. That just means you're not gonna sit down at the dais and have a vote or a discussion, right? I mean, because an action was taken because an offer to purchase was drafted 2 days later. And so I'm saying I'm not an expert on,
Yeah, and
Let me,
scholar either, so
I think
please.
we're getting far
Yeah.
afield from the agenda. And
Sounds
that
pretty
concerns me a
relevant.
little bit. We're talking about the transaction and so on, and the agenda item is the due diligence.
well, what
So I
does due
think, but
diligence mean?
I'm not trying to minimize what you're saying, Gloria,
No,
but
I'm just asking, what does due diligence mean?
it means looking into the underpinnings of the transactions, the value of the property, right? The price we're paying for it. It's the same thing to me. That means when you make an offer to buy a home, right? And you go through the process of saying, kicking the tires and making sure, yeah, the representations that have been made to me are correct, or the representations that have been made to me, maybe they're wrong in one respect or another, but it doesn't affect my judgment as to whether to buy the property. So it's doing those kinds of inquiries, right? To see whether the decisions that you've made and the assumptions that you're making going forward are reasonable based on what you know and what you could know. Now, obviously, we cannot know everything about this, and we cannot know about the future. There will always be uncertainty. So I think we have to distinguish, what are the facts? What are the things that we truly can confirm and we can rely on? And then what are the assumptions that we are building to the future, and what underpins those assumptions? Are they reasonable assumptions? And on what basis are they reasonable assumptions? So to me, that's the process that you have to go through. It is going on right now. Obviously, the public has not been involved in it really up to this point, but come September 4th,
I think the word would be included.
included, right? I mean, all we had at the last board meeting was a public comment period where the
Right.
public was talking to us and expressing their concerns. But the meeting went on very late, and while there was some discussion about logic, it was at 11:30 at night. The room was near empty. So, yes. So this September 4th is really the first real opportunity
Okay,
to get the facts as far as we can nail them down at that point in time. What are the facts and what are assumptions going forward? What underpins those assumptions, and what can be done between September 4th and the next 30 days, 60 days to build any stronger case one way or the other as to what action the board should take.
On that note of what could be done between September 4th and, I wonder if, so maybe, let me frame this in the context of the finance committee. The fall is very, very busy for staff with budgeting, and with capital improvement planning. And in some ways, it's the worst time to be doing this. So should September 4th reveal that the support from the community is so low for this, is it possible that September 5th, September 6th, the board has a special meeting to say, go, no go? So that the staff isn't put through another 6 weeks of due diligence, taking them from things that are really important to us as the finance committee.
I'd say anything's possible, or could take any action anytime. And in my mind, yeah, as soon as this thing looks like a dead letter, we should cut our losses and move on. I get that totally. I don't think we're at that, speaking just for myself, not for the board, not for Dietmar, just for myself. I have a very open mind on this whole transaction. I see this as a transaction that has promise. Promise is not delivery. Promise is is not certainty, and we're going through a process. And at some point in the process, we'll reach a conclusion, and it might be September 6th or 7th or 8th, or it might be October 6th or 7th or 8th. I don't know, because information is still coming out. And I don't believe that board staff have really packaged this in a way that I would expect the residents to understand it. I mean, the board has gotten a lot of information, but when I was a resident in Connecticut, living in Hamden, I wasn't part of city government, and I didn't pay attention to what they were doing. And I'm sure there are a lot of residents here that were not particularly engaged up to this point, but now we've got their attention. I get it. So it's on us, it's on the staff, and it's on the board to make the case, right? For or against. And that's what I expect to really happen on September 4th, is that we say, here is our investment plan, here is our strategy, here's what we're trying to accomplish. And does logic further that, or does it take away from it? And we're still, as a board, I think, trying to convince ourselves. I mean, and to me, this is too big a decision to have a split board. I would really like us to go hand in hand on this thing. But that may not turn out that way. But I think all the board members are keeping an open mind, and we have an obligation to lay it out. So let's see what happens on the 4th. Let's see when we present a case, and various board members of different views speak up and say, this is why, based on this presentation, the facts I know, this is why I support going forward. This is why I support cutting our losses and moving on. And then the next meeting of the board is, mid-September, but maybe there'll need to be a board meeting on September 7th. We can always call one if board members feel strongly that we should do something now, as opposed to letting the process continue to roll forward. But in any event, it's not going to be very long. We all know that. It's a matter of weeks. That's all it is. So let's see what happens. That's the best I can do to answer it. Dietmar, you want to weigh in at all?
I would like to go to Marilyn.
Okay, Marilyn.
I'm not sure, but let's see what Marilyn has to say.
I thought Gloria's questions were right on about what was happening in closed session, because she was trying to figure out, I won't speak for her, but certainly I have been trying to figure out, what due diligence did the board engage in before voting, apparently 5-2, to allocate over $6 million in borrowed money for this deal? And the village believed they did due diligence initially, because when we were informed that the building was Logic, we were given the information that the board was given dated June 12th. I was always confused by this date, June 12th, because I thought the closed session wasn't until June 17th. So apparently the board may have had this days prior to the actual closed session, which is another issue. And it had numbers. It said clearly, the daycare and restaurant spaces, estimated market rates of $25 to $30, projected to generate over 300,000. I thought this didn't come out of thin air. Now that I've done an open records request, maybe it did. The equipment valued at $980,000, clearly indicating, well, what a deal that we got it for $500,000. the current Village Hall property valued between 2.5 and 3 million. There were so many figures pointed out that I had believed there was a lot of documents to support this, and that our board would not have voted to recommend this deal of a lifetime, as I think it's been described by one trustee, without looking at the underlying information that supported it. Instead, I thought it looked like a press release from the selling agent, but
It sounds like a narrative.
I thought, well, I'll wait to see the documents. Now I'm learning there are no documents, Marilyn. We're busy asking staff to find the documents to support this June 12th memo.
Okay, well, the documents are a matter of record, and Julie and Brian have them, and will deliver them as they have time, as they can. Okay, so as far as just a minute, let me finish, Marilyn.
I got a response today and said no documents on a lot of them, so I don't know what you're talking about.
There were documents given at closed session because we got a closed session packet. Okay, right?
Sure, from.
Yeah. That was it.
I'm not talking with respect. The question was posed to me, did the board receive any documents in the course of those closed sessions? And we did, okay?
This is all, and the seller's brochure, unless
That's what was in the packet.
So that's the facts. That's what it is. That's not speculation. That's a matter of record, okay? As to what the board talked about, what they thought, there's the minutes, but beyond the minutes, there's your opportunity on September 4th to ask anything you want. But I don't think tonight, this is what this.
Mark, understand when you're pushing it to September 4th and you're saying, everybody gets to come out on September 4th and everybody gets to ask their questions. Understand what an unfair ask that is, because if you didn't know, like Brian, you pretend you just haven't heard this discussion right now. But then on September 4th, Marilyn were to come to the September 4th meeting with this memo in hand, saying, where's the underlying support for this document? Well, you're not going to be in a position to provide that to her. So when you're saying, let's wait until September 4th, how can you reasonably ask us to wait until September 4th when on the agenda tonight is due diligence? And we are having a discussion about due diligence. I don't think it's a fair thing to say, wait until September 4th for the public meeting, when people will come to the public meeting and perhaps ask these exact questions, but then Brian and Julie are not in a position to provide the answers.
Well, what are we talking about waiting for? If you're talking, just let me finish here. If you're talking about documents that the board received prior to or during the closed session, those documents should be released. I'm surprised they are already on the website. Anything the board got in those closed meetings is public information.
So the information that says that this building is worth 2.5 to 3 million is on the website.
Don's memo is on
The memo is on it, but I'm saying
That's
she's
all.
asking for support documentation.
Yeah.
This isn't
I
just
can
narrative.
explain this a little bit. I don't know if it's the answer you want to hear, but this is.
No, I
this
just
is
want
what
to
I
hear what's
understand.
real.
So John prepared the memo and he wanted the board to consider this. The reason we had to do the offer to purchase is we needed to lock in a dollar amount and to make sure that no one else could come in and undercut us, if they found out we were looking at this building. So we couldn't, until that offer was locked in, we didn't do due diligence because we didn't know if it was even gonna happen. So the numbers that John provided are just kind of general market numbers. They're not research specifically. I mean, it's numbers some he got from, yes, John.
Okay.
Some I know he got from Tim Rickers as the selling agent, which is, part of what you would expect to see in the sale of a commercial property. So basically they're kind of market numbers to give an idea of the overall picture and value of this property, very general. It was enough so that we could make the offer, and then once the offer was accepted, which took, a few back and forth. Then my understanding is the actual due diligence on the part of staff and board would start, because we weren't gonna do it if they weren't gonna go below $8 million. We weren't gonna do it if they weren't gonna go below $7.5 million. So until that offer, once that hit, then all of a sudden we started the process. So we're just starting the process. of
Remember
due
that,
diligence.
and this was, I think, certainly uppermost in my mind, and I'm sure it was on other trustees' mind as well. We have a 90-day unconditional right to walk away from this thing.
At no cost, like we have nothing.
We don't have to explain ourselves, we just walk away. Okay, that was critical. If that hadn't have been there, I doubt any trustee would have voted for this, okay? The second thing is, this finance committee already reviewed the 2025 to 2029 CIP, okay? And had already recommended the board that we were okay with making borrowing $7.3 million. It wasn't for Logic. It was for Public Works. It was for this building. But this committee said, yeah, this village has the capacity to make this kind of a borrowing should it choose to do that. So yeah, we didn't have a lot of specifics about the building, other than a lot of marketing material, but we did know we could walk away. We did know we had substantial borrowing capacity, and at least some of us believed that this building had some promise, that it was worth looking at. I personally felt that I wouldn't have been doing my job as a trustee if I didn't take a serious look at this, knowing that at the end of the day, I could walk away. And that's where it was. So that's why, it wasn't a June, July closed meeting where we were sitting there with tons of documents and a lot of investigation. We didn't have that. But for myself, well, I would have loved it if we had, but it wasn't dispositive of what I felt we should do because of the fact we had the 90-day, we have the debt capacity, and we have some real challenges going forward in terms of financing this village. And this is one possible solution, one possible alternative that I just didn't feel good about, just saying, oh, never mind. So that's me. Go ahead, Kate.
I don't think you meant it, what you said this way, but I just want to clarify that, yeah, as a finance committee, finance is not just borrowing, right? Finance is the operational considerations and risk. And so as a committee, if we approved 7.4 million of borrowing, I don't want that to become synonymous with the finance committee said we could borrow this much for Logic, because there is significant financial risk that we don't understand yet. But when you're taking on a restaurant and a daycare, that to me is part of the purview of this committee as well. And I just want to be careful with how we phrase what it is that this committee is.
Yeah, no, that's a good point, Kate. And I think what I meant to say, if I didn't make it clearly, is that we had borrowing capacity, but we have choices. Just because we have capacity doesn't mean we borrow money. And just because we have capacity doesn't mean that we don't care what we're borrowing money for. But again, that's what the 90 days, which probably will end up being more like 60 days or whatever, to figure out. And so I don't take it for granted that if the board should say, yeah, we want to do Logic, there's still a due diligence to be done by this committee to look at Brad's scenario and say, okay, show us what, rerun the analysis for us. Now you've got the Logic borrowing in there. You've layered in the other borrowing want to do for streets, for public works, whatever. Show us that. And then the committee will decide, do we want to recommend that borrowing to the board? It's not for the committee, as I've said this often in the past, to pick and choose the projects. That's responsibilities of the board, but it is the responsibility of this committee to say whether whatever the board projects the board wants to do, whether we think the financing is responsible. Okay, and that's the role. So whether the board goes for logic or whether the board goes for public works and renovating this building, there will be financing scenarios associated with that. And that will have to come to this committee, and this committee will either say, yeah, we think those are sensible ways to finance these purchases, or we'll say, no, we think they should be restructured, Brad. It shouldn't be 15 years. It should be a 20-year maturity. And so, yeah. Yes, Julie.
Oh, okay, I'm not a board member, I'm not a committee member, but as a treasurer, I can tell you, I'm not selling this logic either. I want the same due diligence that you're all asking for. I want the facts. But there's two main reasons that this project was interesting to me. I started out saying, what are you thinking? We don't want to be landlords. But the two main things that interest me with this project is the cost for the building itself is less than half of what we've seen from developers is what we're looking at. We want to improve either this property or the public works building. It's less than half. That's a huge value to the village. That we can get a facility that we could use with limited renovations. It's going to need some renovations, but it's something that there's no way we could produce this ourselves for this price. So that's one of the reasons I'm interested. And the other is, you guys understand the difference between the capital budget and the operating budget. The average citizen doesn't always get that. They're like, why are you asking for more money if we can spend $6 million on a property? Two different buckets. Our operating budget is extremely, extremely tight. And this is one of the most promising sources of revenue that I've seen offered. Ellers mentioned wheel tax. And it's gonna generate maybe 50,000. They mentioned, playing some little games with financing. It buys us a couple, maybe 10,000, 20,000. It's not enough to cover the gap. So that's why I want to pursue the due diligence and look into this. Those are really big things.
And where is the revenue coming from for
The
this
revenue would be
project?
from renting.
The
Renting.
restaurant,
Believe
the
it.
restaurant needs revenue.
All right.
So,
But here's the deal, even if
You
we
know,
don't
we-
rent it,
we
even if
are-
we don't rent it, we're still, even if that stays empty, which I don't think it will. I mean, obviously, at some point, we will find leasers. For $6.5 million, we still have a facility with 2 layers of underground parking that we cannot reproduce any other way.
If you ask the question, why did the staff volunteer to put themselves through this process? And you're right, Marilyn, this is increase their workload dramatically, right? But they did it. I shouldn't speak for you, but I'm gonna do it anyway, because they saw some of the promise
Because you had to.
in this transaction. What she thought, just repeating
I
what she
think we
said.
should stay on there. I don't need to have staff advocating for this when we still don't have
No,
that.
I'm not
underlying
advocating, I'm just saying that's the two main points.
Well, it sounds,
But to Mark's point, that he's saying the reason the staff is working on this, and she answered the question. She said, because we have to.
Well,
she also said.
Because they see some value here.
But it's not like as a staff member, she's going to say, no, I refuse to do that.
well, no, but.
See,
it's
that's my
also-
point.
But it's like, I also said, this is the only opportunity I've seen for other revenue sources. And as a treasurer, I'm really concerned about the lack of revenue sources.
Right.
If you
We
have
are
other
land- we are
options, yeah.
landlocked.
there are
Yes.
tons of options for revenue sources. And just
And expense
because
cutting.
the last referendum
Expense cutting.
almost
pretty
failed, just because the last referendum almost failed, does not mean that the people of this community, when they're presented with a thoughtful, well thought out proposal, wouldn't support it. But it has been haphazard. Well, we'll just. let
I
it in.
completely agree with you, Marilyn. this has been a horrible rollout. And it's coming on top of Sweetbriar and Columbia Road, and it's been difficult. But I'm hoping we will start to turn the ship around September 4th. And if we don't, I'm prepared to cut and run. But I think we ought to give this thing a chance.
Do we have an agent? Does someone represent the village?
Bill Cole, our village attorney, has been basically serving as that individual for us in this process right now. He's been doing and making the modifications to the offer agreement. on behalf of
But
the
he's an
village.
attorney, not
Correct.
someone that can, because, maybe this is not what you're looking for, but when you make the presentation, I would not talk about the listing, what the listing agent told you. They represent the other side. I mean, it's their job to represent the other side. So we need some due diligence other than what they've said.
Exactly.
I want to pick up on what Marilyn said very early on with this. The village staff has got an enormous amount of work to do every year, just pulling together the CIP and the budget. And this year, because of logic, they're going to need to pull together 2 CIPs, possibly rough in 2 budgets. And on top of that, do a thorough and well-considered, well-researched and well-documented due diligence. It's a lot of work, and it's not a 90-day time frame. We are looking at CIP budget to be finished in October, November, late October,
Yeah,
early
probably.
November. And we know that contractually, we have to have the due diligence done before the cut and run date. When's that date?
September 4th.
September 4th? No.
Well,
No,
I-
no.
I was
When
just
is that
the
date? Is
information.
November, like when is,
Well, the 90 days was from offer acceptance and I'm
Are you
waiting on the
asking
data.
regarding the purchase or regarding budget?
I'm regarding the purchase, so we've got to get our due diligence done
Before the budget.
Before
Yeah,
Thanksgiving.
absolutely. before
Right.
November.
before November,
Yeah.
right? So we don't have 90 days, and so we're running triple track, really, because we got 2 CIPs, we got 2 budgets, and we've got due diligence on top of that. It's a lot of work. And I'm very concerned that CIP budget is statutorily required. So that will be that will be the emphasis. It has to statutorily, it must be the emphasis. And I'm very, very worried that due diligence is, I think there's a lot of pressure. Just go ahead and go do this. I mean, I've been on this finance committee, I don't know how long, but I feel like this has been front and center. And I have not seen the president of the board waver from this direction. It's just been a matter of, is it going to be in Post Farm Park? Is it going to be at the old village hall? Is it going to be, now it's Logic? But it seems like it's always going to be somewhere. And I feel like I'm really worried about the due diligence.
And that's why I put it on the agenda. And that's why
Right.
I
but
raised it
but
with you,
the state
because
needs
I want to elevate it.
to get all the support together to support that narrative in the memo. And I'm really, really worried that with CIP and budget being statutorily required, the due diligence is going to possibly fall through the cracks in areas. And I'm not trying to fault you. I'm not trying to fault you, Julie. I'm not saying you're not professional. I'm not saying you're not just really great at your jobs. I'm saying it's a lot of work. And it's really important work to be done.
And I will say for my own part, if the work can't get done, I can't support the transaction. But now the question is, there's a whole lot of aspects of this. There's a lot of assumptions. There will certainly be some due diligence done, whether all due diligence done. I'm not sure that every I has to be dotted and T's crossed, to make this transaction something that makes sense for the village. So I'm not trying to judge now. I don't know. But when we lay it out and we say, okay, what are the critical assumptions? And then the question is, what is the due diligence? Are those assumptions reasonable and based on what? And there may be sufficient credible information to say, yeah, it makes sense, let's go forward, and there may not. But I can't say until we lay out the case, and we haven't done it yet. It's a work in progress. I know it's frustrating for the board, it's frustrating for everyone. But I think it's something that we'll work our way through, and at some point, if it doesn't make sense, it doesn't make sense.
The thing I would ask,
This is a board decision. This isn't a trustee decision. This is a board decision, as all these decisions are. It doesn't rest with an individual, it rests with the entire board. Yep, Marilyn.
just a simple thing is, this June 12th memo, which lays out, and I've heard our Julie even say the revenue makes sense. I would say go down this, and if you don't have the documents to support that, tell the residents. Certainly our meeting on August 19th, there were residents who were in the restaurant business who didn't think it made sense. Having said that, I guess the due diligence is going on now, as Gloria pointed out, with all the other things. But if it doesn't look like you could get a restaurant with 300,000 in annual income, which would help avoid the need for a future referendum, as Mr. Imes said, well, tell the people, tell them.
I couldn't agree with you more, but I would also just add that this transaction still might be quite attractive, even if the income is not 300,000, or is not 200,000, or is not 100,000. Okay, I realize things have been said, but as to what the critical elements are to make this thing attractive and viable and something we should do, it may not be all the things that have been said up to this point.
This is all that's on the website.
I get that, and
Okay.
I said our communications is horrible because this transaction came out of the blue. There hasn't been the time, but we have the 90-day walk away, and we're going to see how far we can take this. And maybe it has legs and maybe it doesn't. And we'll get the first sense of that on September 4th and process that information and see where we go. I don't know. This isn't me. This is the board's decision. Anyway, I think we're getting kind of near the end of this due diligence discussion. It's coming on to 9 o'clock. So what my thought is going forward, we're going to have this meeting on September 4th. If something else comes up before then, great, but I'm kind of expecting that it's all heading to that date. We may need a special meeting of the committee depending on what comes out. So Brian's seeing the information flow. I'm seeing some of this information flow. And if there's a time that we need to get the finance committee back together, we will do that. We won't necessarily wait for the last minute. We won't necessarily wait for the board to act. If we feel there's something that the finance committee needs to opine on or to look at. So let's see. And you know, you'll have my email, whatever, my phone number. Reach out to me if you have, you know, specific concerns, and we'll talk it through. But I do think there will be a lot more information. there's a lot has been shared with the board already with respect to space allocation. Tom Deegan has done a lot of work for the village on that. We had, before that, we had FGMA doing work on that. So there's a lot of work on that side of the equation, if you will. The logic side, not so much. So, but I appreciate that the board, the board has seen more, but it's all out there for the public as well. It's just that the public wasn't particularly animated by all that stuff up to this point. But if they want to get into it, go to the board packet, go to the board minutes of the last couple of meetings where those reports, they're all there, and the board discussion. So,
But the board hasn't, Tom Deegan gave a lot of good proposals, but you haven't balanced those.
we have not, and that's what my own presentation, or at least I hope I get to make a presentation. That's what I'm working towards. And I know at least one other trustee is working in the same direction, just to say, here are the alternatives. Here are the choices. Here's what our capital plan is. What are our goals for the community? And does logic further those goals? Does it take away from those goals? Are there alternatives which have a better chance of reaching those goals? Sustainability, economic development, staff retention. There's just a whole host of things that are discussed in our strategic plan and our comprehensive plan. Those are our goals. That's what we're trying to achieve. And we are looking at this facilities issue in light of those goals and in light of all the other capital needs that the village has: streets, parks, pool, vehicles. I mean, there's a lot of needs. So that has to be organized and brought to the board, and presented to the public in a organized fashion. And that's what I'm working towards on September 4th. And I know others are working in the same vein.
I'm sorry, I know you want to adjourn the meeting and I'd like to, but, okay, my pet thing is the pipes under the road. Because I can remember a long time ago when I was on the Public Works Committee, Denny said at some point, you're gonna have to start paying for those.
Yeah.
If we have to start paying, because they're over 100 years old, whatever. Does it come out of the general fund or does it come out of utilities?
It doesn't, utilities have their share of the expense, but if it's not a operating budget item, it's a capital budget expense, okay? So some of it may be allocated to water, to sewer, right? Because they're part of the project, but it's the capital.
Do we ever have that on any priority list? I mean, we don't.
It's, if you look at the the approved CIP 25 to 29, there is money set aside for streets, okay?
But I thought it was only like just the paving.
Well, it could be paving, could be reconstruction. If it's reconstruction, it's obviously more expensive, but there was like $2 million next year sort of set aside for that.
So
But you're right. The analysis that we got from Town and Country engineers, they did a complete inventory of all the streets and they totaled it up, and its present value in today's dollars, it's like $42 million. Okay, so if you just waved a magic wand and wanted all the streets redone, that's what it would cost you, according to those estimates. So it is a big nut. When I was chair of the Public Works Committee, about, I don't know, 7 years ago, the east side had already been reconstructed. The east side is taken care of. They got new streets. They're good. But the west side, all we've done is patch. And the decision was 6-7 years ago to resurface the streets. And that's what happened. Like Mendota Drive, all those streets were resurfaced because we didn't feel financially we were ready to take on the reconstruction work, which just totals into the millions as opposed to $800,000. So Yeah, we understand that's a big nut and.
So
Yeah.
it's there, but it's 2 million.
Yeah, it's something that's out there and so is, that's why we look at that TIF money. The TIDS, right? That 400,000. When you add them, the other TIDS in, it's over $500,000 of annual incremental operating revenue for the village. I mean, it's critical, but that's 5 years out. And we go 5 years, you know.
But we already allocated, I thought, a little over 2 million for Tally Ho. That was to go forward.
Yeah, I understand. I think Brian could speak to it more exactly, but apparently it takes some time to plan for these kind of reconstructions. And I'm not sure that we're going to be ready anytime soon. If we said we wanted to Tally Ho, what, 6 months, a year to,
Yeah, there's.
to a
considerable
proper
amount of
planning for
resident
that project.
engagement, Engineering science and.
Right, but that
But
was part
these-
of how we didn't earmark it, but the board was supposed to. So
And these are again, the kind of conversations I know in my remarks at the September 4th meeting. This is the issue. It isn't just logic. It isn't just renovation of these facilities. It's the whole capital investment plan. Where do we want to spend our capital dollars? Not where do we want to spend our operating dollars, but our capital dollars, which are principally, not exclusively, but principally funded with debt. That's where the money's coming from. So there's a baseline in the CIP, but obviously that can be changed by the board. Dietmar.
Yeah, real quick, just for correction's sake. So, Marilyn, I guess I don't recall ever having a conversation on the board about earmark $2 million for streets to be specific to Tally Ho.
It wasn't.
So those
It was a
conversations.
placeholder. It was saying that's what's available to do.
So I just want to dispel any myths
Yeah.
that are out there.
thank you, but that was the worst street, right?
Yes.
It's,
I
yes,
think
it's
that-
near the top of the list of, they were
It
ranked and
checked
that's
all the
near the
boxes
worst.
in terms of priority needs, but the board has never discussed and said, next project is Tally Ho.
You're correct.
So I just wanted to dispel
agree.
that myth that's out there, perhaps, maybe, whatnot, but that's.
And
Do
we
that.
also,
Yep, no, that's it.
we also need to build up cash, in our utilities.
Yep.
Before we can take on a big project like that. And hopefully as some of the old debt falls off, we'll have enough cash to cover and start doing more with the utilities, but that's something we're also looking at. Brian has a rate case on with the PSC right now.
And really, to that end, Julia, I don't mean to jump in here, but you had mentioned this and so eloquently explained it before. The goal really is for the utilities to be able to take on debt, because then the debt can get spread out to the utility users.
Correct.
The water users, sanitary users.
He's telling us that.
Not just the taxpayers,
Not
because
just the
we have
taxpayers.
users who use utilities
that
or
are
do
not
not pay
taxpayers.
property tax.
Okay, keep telling us that.
Well,
Thank you,
Julie
Dietmar, for bringing
explained
that
it so eloquently, so it just stuck with me last time around. That's it.
So that's where we are.
We have future agenda items.
We have a
Is that,
lot of work
Do we
ahead
have
of
any
us.
future agenda items?
is that, can we add
That's
that?
number 9.
Dietmar.
Yeah, just real quick, and Gloria, actually, I appreciate you bringing up item 9C again. I guess maybe without having a broader discussion about it, but would it be possible, Brian and Mark, to consider having, I think it's Sonia Russell at Vanderwall, our zoning person, right, that replaced Scott Harrington?
What?
To maybe come in and talk about TID, an opportunity and capacity?
That would be
Yes.
amazing.
So
Could
actually,
we have a special meeting specifically on TIDs? It's a big issue. We've got 3 TIDs, we've got a potential TID that maybe opens up in 5 years. You know, I mean,
So
actually, this is a joint review board is the one who looks at that and reviews the TIDs. And they usually meet in October. That'd probably be if you wanted to watch that meeting, or that would be a really good source of information, and the information from Vanderwall, the report, it'll be from the 24 numbers. will be included in that presentation. It's generally not a finance committee issue, it's usually a joint review board issue as far as, developing new TIDs and things. We don't have any capacity. I can tell you right now, we cannot add any TIDs until those TIDs.
So I think we're having this discussion now, which we don't intend to have, and that's what I was trying to offer here, is maybe for the next meeting, because it is relatively simple, as you just try to explain, that's simple, but it's not long-winded, talk about future capacity of the TIDs. So maybe to actually have this address and spend 10-15 minutes talking about it might be worth our while, even though it's not in the purview of the finance committee. But I think it sort of helps us inform as we look forward more.
Sonia is on leave, so, and I don't know if I'd recommend having a consultant come for that.
No.
We can't make,
No.
No, but
so I
mean,
don't know
your
how much
memo-
information will be available. If you might want to wait until after October and then we'll have more
That
current
makes some
information.
sense. So,
So will Venwall produce the 2024 report? I presumably before that October meeting. I think the sooner we get that, the better, because I also like those numbers baked into the Ellers financial model.
To wait until the equalized values came out, and they came out Friday. I mean, they just came out. So
Okay. But I mean, we're just so close to getting updated numbers. I'd like to hold off the discussion to get those numbers. And again, it'd be great if Ellers could take those numbers and put those in the financial plan, which is part of the reason why I push for that is a CIP only goes out 5 years and the TIDs are just beyond that. So, but Ellers goes out 10 years. So they have a much longer term perspective on this. And it'd just be very helpful to have the latest numbers.
October is always when we get our TID in.
That'd be great. Anything else before we wrap up tonight? If not, let's see what happens at September 4th and then we'll meet again. We're scheduled to meet on the 22nd, if not before, depending on how things evolve from here.
Marilyn made a motion.
I second.
All those in favor of adjourn, raise your hand. We're done. Thanks so much for coming. I think it's been really helpful and I hope you get a lot of the answers that you're asking for on the 4th, and what you don't, we'll try to get to you thereafter.
And Brian, Julie, I gotta tell you, when you guys put this together last time, it's been excellent. Because I like the hard copy, it's always accessible, so hopefully this will happen again.